earlier, we caught up with Matt Moscona to talk about LSU football 2022. Here it is. Matt, let's talk a little bit about what has gone on at LSU. Brian Kelly was a name that for some people came out of nowhere. He doesn't quite fit, to me, the LSU style. Feels a little bit like a round peg in a square hole. So what has it been like?
Well, I think the transition's gone exceptionally well, actually. And I like to remind people that the three most successful coaches in LSU athletics history. In baseball is a guy named Skip Bertman, won 5 national titles in 10 years. He's a Jewish man who was born in Detroit and came to Baton Rouge from Miami, which is, of course, Louisiana's heavily Roman Catholic in South Louisiana, Spanish, French. And Skip then became the AD and is still revered here. Dale Brown, who's from Minot, North Dakota, came down and became the winningest basketball coach in the SEC behind only Adolph Rupp. And Nick Saban, who spent his entire coaching career in the Midwest before he came to Baton Rouge and won a national championship. The bottom line is, it doesn't matter where you're from or what you sound like. If it's purple and gold here and it wins, people will love it. So it doesn't matter where Brian Kelly's from, how he says family or what he eats for dinner. If he comes here and he wins, people will support it and he will be revered. But that's the tricky part, is can he take the success that he's had at other places and build upon that here? Because the expectation isn't win games, George. The expectation is to win championships at LSU, and rightfully so. But that's why he's here. He didn't feel like he could get over that hump while he was at Notre Dame, and he is going to be able to get over that hump here at LSU. That's his hope.
Well, past history, Matt, seems to indicate that for sure 21 of the starters get to championship kind of level, and then it comes down to the quarterback position. And when you have a Joe Burrow, all that other talent seems to make it happen. Has he got that quarterback?
Probably not this year. And that's going to be the key, is finding it. Now, Joe Burrow is an outlier. I don't know that LSU will ever have it. Listen, Georgia, in these parts, when you grow up in Louisiana, all you hear is Billy Cannon. Billy Cannon, Billy Cannon. Halloween run, Billy Cannon, Heisman winner. Forever and ever and ever, Billy Cannon was that. Any conversation about the greatest ever at LSU started with Billy Cannon. That was not even debatable. Billy Cannon has been surpassed by Joe Burrow. He did something I never thought I'd see in my lifetime. So I don't think we'll ever see another Joe Burrow. But can LSU get championship caliber quarterback play? They won a national championship in 2003 with Matt Mock. They won a national championship in 2007 with Matt Flynn. And they played for one in 2011 with the combination of Jordan Jefferson and Jarrett Lee. So LSU's been able to win at a high level here without Joe Burrow. We could certainly have the conversation if the game of college football has evolved such that you have to have a Joe Burrow to win a national championship. I don't know that I necessarily believe that. But this year, no. You got Miles Brennan, who's a sixth-year player, who's only started 3 career games. You got Jaden Daniels transferring in from Arizona State, who started 30 games in his career, but has been both hot and cold. And you got some really young, talented guys who I think Garrett Nussmeier, Walker Howard could be that next generation of elite quarterback at LSU, but I don't know that we see that this year.
When Orgeron left at the end of last season, whatever level it was at, it kind of sounds like Brian Kelly's been able to say, okay, wherever the holes were, we're just going transfer portal. And it sounds like he's patched a bunch of it.
And that was out of necessity, George. People outside of here may not remember this, but LSU played because why would you pay attention to the Texas Bowl with 6-6 LSU against Kansas State? But LSU played that bowl game with 39 scholarship players, and they had a receiver. They had a receiver playing quarterback. Quite honestly, the LSU should not have played in that game. So Brian Kelly came into a roster that had about 50 scholarship players on it. He had to address the transfer portal. Even with a signing class of 25 incoming freshmen, you're not even approaching your number of 85. So he added 15 transfers just to be able to field a team this year. He needed to be able to field a team with guys who had played major college football. So Both of LSU starting cornerbacks this year are going to be transfers. You got potentially 2 starters on the offensive line that are going to be transfers. You got a starting safety that's a transfer. You might have a starting linebacker that's a transfer. I mean, Noah Cain, the running back from Penn State, transferred in. He's going to carry a lot of the load. I mean, when LSU fans go to the stadium this year, they're going to, or watch on TV, they're going to have a roster in their hands because it's going to take a while to get to know who's who on this team. And like in camp, where they'll put the tape on the helmet with the player's name. I mean, that's not just for freshmen this year. That's for everybody because they're going to have to get to know everybody, top to bottom, coaching staff included.
Matt, I've always said if I could pick one place in the SEC that I have broadcast a game, it's LSU. Tiger Stadium at night is the cat daddy of all of them. It was shocking to me to watch some games a year ago and see the erosion. Is it like that? Kelly comes and that problem is gone?
So I think there's 2 parts to the answer. Number one is Tiger Stadium is similar to every other place in that the at-home viewing experience happening at the time of major college stadium expansion is just going to lead to smaller crowds. For LSU to get 103,000 people in Tiger Stadium, it's going to take a night game against Alabama, a top 5 matchup, something like that. But specifically, what you were saying, where you look up and you see 60,000 people in the stadium and it's rather lifeless, I think you're immediately going to have a jolt. And Tiger Stadium is still as good a big game atmosphere as you will find in any sport anywhere. When the stars align and it's a night game and there's a big opponent coming in and people are rowdy and ready and the Tigers are playing for something, Tiger Stadium is special. I mean, it's exactly what you just described, and that is legitimate. The Brian Kelly factor will add immediate juice, but they got to win, George. They got to win. I mean, if they lose the opener to Florida State and they drop their first SEC game to Mississippi State, there's going to be this exhale and a here we go again. And it'll take time. People will actually be really upset. But whenever you might see that crowd build again, it might take. It's going to take winning. It's going to take winning to get people back engaged.
Wouldn't hurt if the first Sunday night of the year at the Superdome, Florida State turns out to be a win. Do you think it will?
I do. What's amazing? I know you'll remember, but throughout the 90s, Florida State set a record for the most consecutive seasons finishing in the top 5 of the AP poll. I mean, they were as awesome as any program was in the 90s watching them. I mean, the Flamin' Spear in midfield, Chief Osceola, the Tomahawk chant. I mean, Charlie Ward and Warwick Dunn, and all the way through Chris Winke's highs. But God, they were so good. You realize Florida State has not had a winning regular season since 2016. So last time they had a winning record in the regular season.
Hard to believe.
It is. It's been a half decade. They were 9-3 that year and went to the Orange Bowl under Jimbo. I like Mike Norvell. I just think he still has a major rebuild on his hands. From 3 wins 2 years ago to 5 wins last year. I don't know that they get over the hump against LSU this year. And keep in mind also that Brian Kelly's Notre Dame team last year opened up against Florida State. So he's going to have familiarity game planning against that. And the same can be said likewise for Florida State game planning against Brian Kelly. But the personnel, I think, is the difference. Brian Kelly's going to know Florida State's personnel, played against them a year ago. And the game's in New Orleans, which is a de facto home game. So I do think LSU will have a decided advantage in that game. I don't think they run away with it, but I do think LSU does win that opener against Florida State.
I'm laughing. It's more than a de facto home game. It'll be an absolute overflow. Let me ask you this last thing I want to kind of run by you. It's obvious LSU has had this great recruiting base in the state, down into the Texas, Houston area specifically. How much has Kelly expanded that with his background?
Yeah, it's a really good question because that's a big hot button here right now. LSU's been on this pretty hot recruiting run here in the last 2 weeks, but they've only got 3 commitments of their 15 from inside the state. And some of the biggest prospects in the state of Louisiana this year are already committed out of state. And listen, in fairness, you got to give Brian Kelly and the staff time to develop relationships here and and for the recruits to get to know him and how they're going to play, and all that's true. So time will tell. But what they've been able to do in that interim, right, as they start to build those relationships in the state of Louisiana, is tap into what you just talked about, is cast a wide net nationally, because that's what Brian Kelly had to do at Notre Dame. Jamar Cain, the defensive line coach, came in from Oklahoma. Well, he was recruiting nationally at the defensive line position. A lot of guys that he had offered at Oklahoma had LSU offers. So he said, look, I was recruiting you at Oklahoma. Come play for me at LSU. And he's had tremendous success there. The second highest rated commit in the class right now is a guy named Jackson Howard. They've gotten guys out of Indiana, out of Michigan, out of the East Coast, the Maryland area. So yes, they have taken advantage of those relationships, because I think it is the advantage that they have right now out of necessity until they build some deeper relationships in Louisiana.